This is Arab Talk on KPOO 89.5 FM in San Francisco. This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal. I'm Jess Hannam.
And I'm Jamal Dejani.
Jamal, we're in the aftermath of the 12-day war between the Israeli military and the Iranian government. After the 12-day war and the so-called ceasefire, we still have no idea about the full impact of the U.S.-Israeli bombing of the Iranian nuclear sites. Some people, including the Trump administration, say obliterated. Others, including the IAEA, have said that the Iranian nuclear capability could be reconstituted within weeks. So we have no idea. What we know is that hundreds of Iranians were killed. We know that Israeli cities were bombed. We have no idea. And in the midst of that, Jamal, Gaza continues to be a killing field. Every single day, Jamal, between 50 and 100 Palestinian civilians, men, women, and children, are being killed and murdered in Gaza just trying to get food. The situation remains dire. The West Bank is on fire. Israeli settlers continue to attack, maim, kill Palestinians in the West Bank. The situation continues to be grave, and Palestinian children continue to, in fact, starve to death. We're going to be covering those stories, including a bombshell report, Jamal, that Israeli soldiers confessed to Haaretz that they were ordered to fire at unarmed Palestinian crowds nearing the food lines in Gaza. We're going to also fully go into the idea of whether or not the U.S. actually did incapacitate or destroy the Iranian nuclear capability. And in a more local story here in the States, Jamal, we're going to talk about Zoran Mandami's New York City campaign. He beat Cuomo in the Democratic primary. It was an earthquake in Democratic politics. But the Islamophobia has been coming out full steam. Before we get to all that, Jamal, we're going to watch an interview that you did with journalist Daoud Kuttab. Going to discuss the increased exodus of Christian communities in the Middle East due to violence and economic hardships, especially in the latest attacks on Palestinian Syrian churches. It's a painful interview that you did with Daoud.
Yes, it's really, this is what's going on, sadly, with all the distraction, with what's happening in Gaza, with what's happening with the war with Iran, that 12-day war, I would call it, with Iran. Christians have been slaughtered in Syria. We know what happened in Gaza when Israel targeted a Greek Orthodox church, one of the oldest in Palestine, basically, and in the world, and also the harassment that Palestinian Christians are subjected to, including priests and churches by Israeli settlers. Let's watch Daoud Kuttab. On Sunday, June 22nd, a suicide bombing at St. Elias Greek Orthodox Church in Damascus killed more than 20 worshippers and injured dozens more. This is another tragic reminder of the peril that Syria's religious communities now face, adding impetus to an ongoing exodus of Christians from the Middle East, the very cradle of Christianity. For decades, Christians in the Middle East have witnessed their numbers dwindle due to war, occupation, and sectarianism, threatening centuries of cultural and religious pluralism that characterize the region. Adding to this is Israel's ongoing bombing and killing of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, where Israeli settlers consistently attack and spit on Christians and churches while Israeli security forces look on. Most recently, Israeli settlers invaded and burned the Palestinian Christian town of Taibe, killing 3 Palestinians. Joining us on Arab Talk is Daoud Kuttab. His article, The Damascus Church Bombing and the Collapse of Middle East Christianity, discusses the imperative of reversing this trend. Daoud Kuttab is a former Ferris Professor of Journalism at Princeton University and publisher of Milh al-Ard, or milhalard.org, dedicated to the Christian community in Jordan and Palestine. Welcome again to Arab Talk, Daoud.
Thank you, Jamal.
There is much criticism for a variety of reasons about the Bashar al Assad regime, but the current persecution of various minorities that one sees now was not one of them. How were Christian communities in particular faring under the previous as opposed to the current government?
Well, normally, Christian communities align themselves with the powers to be, just like any other minority. And because Bashar al-Assad ran a secular government, it made sense that the Christian community was close and felt protected by the Bashar al-Assad government. Now, that's not a universal situation because a number of leading Christian Syrians were part of the opposition, the secular opposition to Assad, and a number of Syrian Christians were imprisoned and killed by the Assad regime. But in general, the population generally was aligned with the government at the time.
Suffering persecution for one's religion is a fearful reality. A suicide bomber going into an actual church is a different level of terror, even if the current government was not directly involved. Do you think that it is keeping with an aim to purify the country?
There is a trend within the new um, ecosystem that was created by Ahmed Shara al-Jolani, who used to basically lead an Islamic resistance to Assad. And he was actually on the U.S. Terror list, wanted for, I think, $10 million or whatever. So there is a very close relationship between the current government and the Islamist, radical Islamists, who do want to purify what they consider the kind of cradle of Islam in Damascus and so on, but who are clearly misguided. And at the same time, Shara has not taken on these people because they are the ones who helped him get to power. So he's playing a dancing game between wanting to please the Western countries and his own population. And he has good relations, apparently, with some of the Christian leaders. But at the same time, he has failed to crack down on the Islamic or Islamist cells that are created, that were part of his original power structure.
The ongoing wars and occupation within the Middle East have resulted in enormous numbers of Christians immigrating out of the area. For example, during the Iraq War, many of the Chaldean Catholic and Assyrians left the country. Even before that, we can go all the way back to during the Ottoman Empire. You have entire communities. There is more than 400,000 Palestinians living in Chile alone, from Beit Jala and Beit Lahm region. Can you give us a condensed overview of how the Christian percentage of the population in the Middle East has decreased and in a few of the most significant events triggering it?
At one time, the Palestinian population, 20% of the Palestinian population were Christians living in Palestine. Now they're less than 2% or 1%. Same in most of the Arab countries. What you have, Jamal, is that the entire Middle East has been rocked with occupation, violence, a lack of stability. And normally, when people face such political turmoil, they look for escape. And Arab Christians have natural relationship with fellow Christians around the world, and so they are much more at ease and easier for them to immigrate than the rest of the population. But in times of war, everybody wants to leave. Nobody wants to stay in a country that is at war. It's unstable, and so on. And so the Arab Christians, percentage-wise, immigrated at a larger level than the rest of the population, simply because they had relationship opportunities. And once it started, people were able to do it much more because they have relatives in the West, and so their relatives can give them legal coverage and so on, as well as financial coverage. So it has been a very bad uh, situation, almost like a monopoly. Things have escalated, and as more people left, more and more people had opportunities to leave, and so we're left with a very small population. Even though, in terms of effects, in terms of properties, business, professional involvement, they're quite much there. I mean, they bat higher than their average, but because there is such a small population, uh, they're not as effective as they could be.
But in certain areas, they're at risk of disappearing completely. Christians in Palestine are under constant attack by either the Israeli military or Israeli settlers with their support. In Gaza in 2023, Israel bombed the church of St. Porphyrius, one of the oldest in the world, built as early as 425 AD. The Christian community of Gaza is tiny. It's about 1,000 people, yet they are steadfast. I mean, under these conditions, do you think they'll even survive the genocide?
Yes, I mean 3% of the Christians, and they're a small number, were killed in Gaza. Over 25 people were killed in Gaza in the last 2 years, snipers and bombings and so on. Those who were able to leave have left already, so they're even less than 1,000 that you mentioned. And the situation in the West Bank and Jerusalem is not any less problematic. People are leaving in large numbers simply to find better opportunities for them, their children, and their families. So, there's a lot of effort to encourage people to stay in the Middle East to work. There's housing projects that are coming up by the churches, by others, to encourage people to stay in the West Bank. Christian organizations are the third highest employer among Palestinians in Jordan and Palestine and other countries. The government has created quotas in parliament in some of the Christian populated cities to ensure that Christians have a strong representation, even larger than their actual percentage, because they are a strong contributor to the GDP. In Jordan, 35% of the GDP is run by Jordanians of Christian faith. And so they're a strong influence to the economy, but their numbers are small.
Well, let's talk about actually, because you talk about the churches, I mean, how do you propose to stop or slow down this ongoing exodus of the Christian community from the Middle East? I personally don't trust the Western world to do anything about it. In fact, the opposite. I mean, do you believe that that Middle Eastern Christian communities in diaspora, for example, could play a role? Do you believe that the larger churches, such as the Catholic Church or the Greek Orthodox Church, have interest in preserving the indigenous Christian communities?
I, as a publisher of a website that focuses on this issue, we've exposed a number of areas that the churches have not done enough to support this. I don't want to be totally negative. There is a interesting increase in number of housing projects in employment by Christians, but yes, the churches can do much more. They are not doing enough to encourage people to stay. And their own economic finances are totally not transparent. There's accusations of selling land and property of the church to unknown people, and sometimes to settlers and so on. So there are problems in the church coming from the kind of dictatorial setup that they are running, and the population is not very happy with the way the church leaders act. But in general, I would say they're trying and not doing enough. But I think there is some positive elements. We've seen housing projects in Beit Sahur, in Beit Jala, in Ramallah. There is a number of projects, and we have two major universities, Bir Zayed and Bethlehem University, and Kalime, owned and run by churches or church-related Christian families. So I think there is a contribution by the churches and by Christian families to upholding and saving the Palestinian Christian community in Palestine. But you're right, it's not enough. It should be much more.
In the United States, perhaps also in other Western countries, there is a strong, other countries with strong Christian communities and values. There is a stark ignorance about the oldest Christian communities in the world. Even I was watching an interview with Tucker Carlson. He was astounded not too long ago when he discovered that there are indeed indigenous Christians living in the cradle of Christianity, in the Holy Land. My question is it only ignorance, or for people like Ambassador Mike Huckabee now, this ambassador, in Palestine, in Israel, in Jerusalem, who is an ardent Christian Zionist, does it just not matter if they don't follow the same messianic ideology, and that's why they just don't want to pay attention to what's happening to Christian communities in Palestine, in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, and so on?
Yeah, I think there's two problems. We have one problem, which is a stereotype problem. The Arab-Israeli conflict is often constructed and framed as an Islamic conflict with the Muslim world or Islamist. And, it didn't help the fact that those who carried out the attack on September 11th were coming from Arab or Muslim countries. And they, used Islamic theology or whatever they call it to justify the attack. So I think there is a general stereotype that a problem that we have, and then I think you're right. There is also a concerted effort by Christian Zionists like Huckabee and others to paint a black and white picture with the Israelis being the good people who are the descendants of the chosen people of God and so on, and the Arabs and Muslims are bad people, and they totally ignore the existence of Arab Christians. There are Christians in Iran. How many people know that there's 30,000 Christians in Iran as well? So we have both a stereotypical problem and a problem of Zionists, Christian Zionists acting against their own community and against their people of their own faith.
When churches are bombed and worshippers are terrorized and murdered, this leaves a long-lasting impact as people become cut off from their community of faith. You mention in your article many proclamations by religious and multi-faith organizations condemning these acts. These are nice gestures, but will this restore confidence and security to those affected?
Well, an interesting thing happened after the terrible terrorist bombing of the church is that there is, at least, I hope it's not a short term, but there's been almost a revival of Syrian Christians. We saw demonstrations, protests, people marching in streets in large numbers carrying crosses. This never happened before. And so I think there is almost like a revival of Christianity in Syria that the government has not stopped. And now, I don't know if this is a knee-jerk reaction that people want to kind of claim or reclaim their faith and so on. And then once the lights and cameras are off, then people will realize how difficult life is, and we'll still have the immigration problem. But yes, I think the very I would say wall-to-wall denunciation of the Middle East Council of Churches, of church leaders, of Christian community leaders of all faiths. I think it was a shot in the arm and encouraged people to stay put, because, as I said, our biggest problem is immigration. If we don't find ways to encourage people to stay put, we will be left with churches being museums instead of living stones, and we need to encourage people to stay in the region, to be part of the region, and we would love to have people return from diaspora to come and work and invest and be part of our societies in the Middle East.
Do you feel Israel has all intention of basically, I mean, they're trying to ethnically cleanse, they've been trying to ethnically cleanse Palestine since 1948, but do you feel that there is now a focused effort on getting rid of the Christian community in Palestine? There is a report in 2024 by the Rossing Center, which is an Israeli organization, that says that there were 111 reported cases of attacks against Christians by Israelis, including 46 physical attacks, 35 attacks against church properties, 13 cases of harassment. And they were mostly against clergy or people wearing visible Christian symbols. Can you expand on this?
Well, I think the Israeli government is acting in different ways. On the one hand, they're very happy with Christian Zionists like Huckabee and others who are more Israeli than the Israelis and more pro-Israel than many Jews around the world. But at the same time, the government of Netanyahu, which is made up of extreme right-wing Jewish nationalists who abhor anything other than Jews, who are fighting or creating Jewish monopoly or Jewish controlled areas because they want the Jewish supremacy in Palestine, Israel. And so I think the Netanyahu government has been silent and not standing up against these hooligans who are attacking and hurting Christians. But at the same time, Netanyahu is benefiting from the Hackabees and others who are supporting Israel within the White House and within Congress through AIPAC and others. So I think there's a almost schizophrenic reaction. On the one hand, they're happy to benefit from Christian Zionists. They're happy to bring tourists to Christian sites in Palestine and Israel. But at the same time, they are not courageous enough to stand up against their own radicals who are hurting their own image around the world.
We talk about the Christian community in diaspora. In fact, there are more Palestinian Christians living in diaspora than in Palestine, more Lebanese Christians living in diaspora than in Lebanon, and possibly there are more Iraqi Christians living in diaspora than in Iraq, and so on. What can these communities do? I mean, you're talking about, I don't think it's very possible for these communities to go back after establishing their lives. And many, like the Lebanese, they've been in, for example, the United States for several generations. I mean, do you expect them to return to Lebanon or maybe help support those people who are staying in Lebanon?
Yeah. I was just talking to a Lebanese person here in Jordan, and he was saying that during the summer months, Lebanese from around the world come back to, for vacation and so on, and that helps the economy. No, I don't expect the people who started jobs, who have homes, who have mortgages, who are involved in countries that they're in, to return en masse. I do expect that many people with opportunities, professionals, reconsider or consider investing in the countries of their origin, in working in the countries of their origin, or seeking opportunities. There's a lot of opportunities, and we'd love to have the mix of the education and the people who have done research in the West to come and try to pass on and exchange technology between them and people in the East. And I think that synergy is very useful. But you're right. I don't think people in mass will return. But I do think that if there is peace and quiet and opportunities, people do come back as professionals or as investors, and certainly for vacations. And people do have the depth of their cultural heritage that is often encouraging them to return or to visit or to reconnect with their family and people of their origin.
Are we at a panic mode Is this, have we gotten to a point of no return? I mean,
I think, Jamal, we've been at a panic mode for decades. I think when we're talking about 1 or 2% of the population, that's not a very important and effective percentage. So we've been in a panic mode for some time, and I don't see any change. I don't see a reversal of this panic mode. We're still in panic mode, and I think we'll be there for a while. But I do also salute people who have, chosen to stay in Ramallah, in Bethlehem, in Jerusalem, in Amman, in Beirut, in Damascus, in Homs, in Baghdad, in all these places. We want people to stay. The Egyptian Copts are still the biggest kind of Arab Christian community in the region, but we need to also pay attention to, as I said, providing housing, providing jobs, and finding ways to encourage their community to be part of their own communities. We need to make sure that they have equal rights with their fellow citizens in the countries they're in, and that their specific needs. For example, now there's talk about the inheritance issue. Arab Christians want to have equal rights, and they don't want to be under the Sharia heritage laws, which apply in many Arab countries. So there are specific needs that need to be addressed. But in general, countries have been respectful to the Arab community and excited about their contribution to the economy, to society. But we need to do more.
Daoud Kuttab, thank you as always for coming on Arab Talk.
Thank you, Jamal.
That's the voice and the face of Daoud Kuttab. He's a journalist discussing the mass exodus of Palestinian and Syrian Christian communities as a result of the violence that's been, kind of taking over the region, Jamal. And one of the targeted communities has been the Christian community. And as you mentioned, and as he mentioned, especially in Syria and Palestine, Palestinian Syrian Christians have to leave just to save themselves. It's a really dire situation.
That's right. I mean, the Palestinian Christians, pre-1948 used to be more than 20% of the population. Now they are less than 2% of the population, just to give you an idea. After the war in Iraq, Chaldean Christians left in droves. Most of them, as you know, a lot of them live in the United States, in the Detroit area. And now we're seeing with this new government in Syria, where actually Christians prospered in Syria before under the Assad regime because it was a secular regime. And now a suicide bombing happens during a Sunday mass, which is unheard of. So you could see the repercussions here. So moving on to our other stories, Jess, Israeli soldiers have now confessed that their superiors have been giving them orders to open fire at unarmed Palestinian civilians desperately seeking aid at designated distribution sites in Gaza. And this is a major report in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz. The report came as 70 Palestinians were killed across the Gaza Strip, mostly at aid sites belonging to the widely now condemned Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, otherwise known as GHF, in the last 48 hours. And the soldiers were saying that instead of using crowd control measures, they were ordered to shoot at the civilians. Imagine, these are desperate and starving civilians. One soldier who was not named in the report described the distribution site, as you've mentioned in your intro, as a killing field, adding that where I was between 1 and 5 people, where he was placed, between 1 and 5 people were killed every day. The soldiers said that they targeted the crowds as if they were an attacking force instead of using other non-lethal weapons to organize and disperse crowds. He also said that none of these people were armed, and they knew that. Instead, they used machine guns, grenade launchers, and mortars to attack the elderly, the desperate elderly, the women, and the children.
Yeah, Jamal. I mean, this is something that we have been reporting on for almost 20 months now, the indiscriminate killing of Palestinian civilians in Gaza, especially, the women and children who are just trying to, survive and have access to just basic necessities, food and water, right? Let alone medicine. Every time these reports had been brought up by journalists and by us, and when we've reported it that this is what's going on, they're completely dismissed. But now we have from the inside, Jamal, and this is not the first report, but it's the most damning report of Israeli soldiers admitting to being instructed to commit war crimes. I mean, that's basically what it is, being instructed by their commanders, by the Israeli military leadership, to commit war crimes, to murder Palestinian civilians. You mentioned the Gaza Humanitarian Food Group. Jamal, not only is it widely condemned, but it's being run by an Israeli American. The bizarreness of hiring basically war criminals, to administer the food program is, complete rubbish. I mean, and, it's been a complete failure. In addition to killing Palestinian civilians in Gaza, the food and the aid is not getting. The images of the starving children, Jamal, coming from Gaza right now is just beyond belief that it's happening, still happening in this day when there are, plenty of food to get in. So this story continues. It's beyond catastrophic for Palestinian civilians. They're either starving to death or they're being murdered by the Israeli military.
I mean, it's really mind-boggling, just because we've been talking about this. There have been reports and videos and evidence and eyewitness testimonials saying, kids shot, bleeding, saying we went to get a bag of rice or flour and we got shot and my father was killed and I've witnessed my brother getting killed and so forth. And there was denial. Now we have the Israelis in their own words saying, yeah, we were doing it and we were giving orders. Do you think anyone moved to change the situation?
Oh, no.
I mean,
it's just the opposite, Jamal. If anything, is the Israeli military and government continue to be given cover and support by the U.S. government, by Marco Rubio, by Donald Trump, by the highest levels of the American administration and military. I mean, we see this. I mean, we don't have time to talk about it today, but this kind of geopolitical shift, right? Where the idea of just obliterating a people, committing war crimes in plain sight, whether it's, invading Iranian airspace and killing over 400 civilians, or the genocide and the mass slaughter of Palestinian civilians in Gaza, continues in front of everybody. No one's doing anything. You have these weak condemnations from the EU, condemnations from the UN, of course, but nobody is stopping it. I mean, Donald Trump and Marco Rubio and this government continue to support Prime Minister Netanyahu. Even Donald Trump, it's kind of bizarre, Jamal, is asking that his trial that his trial on corruption charges be dropped. I mean, it's kind of bizarre that.
I mean, is this the most important thing that's going on
yes,
there?
For Donald Trump.
But again, I go back. This is a bombshell confession by Israeli soldiers that they were ordered to basically commit war crimes. And I saw condemnations, but I don't see any action. I don't see any action to stop the Israelis. Today they killed more people. Yesterday they killed more people.
Jamal, today
in a couple of hours they'll kill more people.
Listen, today they killed 50 more people. Just since this report came out, they murdered. We say the word killed, but they murdered 50 more Palestinian civilians. And, this is all around trying to get aid to starving Palestinians in Gaza, the civilian population who's literally starving to death. And we have to continue speaking about this, but the complicity of the international community to continue to let this happen, to give Israel and the United States a free pass to commit genocide. Um, that's the story here. I mean, yes, it's a bombshell that Israeli soldiers are admitting that they're killing people uh, on command, but the international community, in its failure to stop this murderous rampage, is also complicit.
It is a killing field as it was described, and we'll continue monitoring the story.
Yes.
Now, the next story, I want to just qualify it. We're just going to report it kind of like he says, she says, because neither you or I claim to have intelligence about what happened.
We don't.
Donald Trump, as you've mentioned, has said, he said that that collected intelligence since the U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites has shown the country's nuclear capabilities have been obliterated. That's the word that he used. Then it runs counter to a leaked U.S. intelligence report, which said that the damage had only set Iran's nuclear program back a few months. And then earlier, this is very confusing. UN nuclear watchdog chief Rafael Grossi said about the Fordow site, which is the most important one, that while no one, including the IAEA, is in a position to have fully assessed the underground damage at Fordow, it is expected to be very significant. Then on Wednesday, he said his top priority is to get inspectors back to Iran's nuclear facilities to assess the impact of U.S. and Israeli military strikes and verify its stocks of enriched uranium. Now, if the sites were destroyed, you'll have a lot of supposedly major nuclear or uranium leaks. So he shouldn't be sending anyone there to inspect.
No, but they've assessed that, Jamal. There have been no major leaks. They can assess.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So that plays counter to that report, right? And of course, last but not least, the Iranians, they're kind of like, hey, nothing happened. We're back in business. I mean, this is basically what we know, what I've been looking at different from the Iranian sides, the American point of view, the IAEA. We went through a 12-day war. Israel, by the way, up till now is preventing journalists from certain areas from videotaping or talking about the damage it sustained. They take them only in front of certain apartment buildings to just kind of say the Iranians have targeted civilian areas, but they haven't taken them to any of their military bases and other sites. So we know that the damage in Israel also in the upward of $5 billion. And as we've mentioned last week, the U.S. taxpayer will end up paying for that.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jamal. And the devastation that was brought to a wide sector of Israeli society, its economy. People are, Israelis are fleeing Israel right now. They're trying to get out, have all this disinformation about how everything's fine, nothing to look at. Yet some of the leaked images that have come out, especially of research institutes and highly sensitive, military sites, some of the leaked information that's come out has shown pretty substantial destruction. And at least I think that we're aware of on the official count, at least over 24 Israelis were killed. The situation, Jamal, is that the fact that Israel continues to bar journalists from certain sites in Israel, they continue to bar journalists from entering Gaza. So we have no full idea except from the reports of Palestinians in Gaza. They're not allowed in various sections of the West Bank. I mean, if everything's hunky-dory, if everything's fine, you let journalists in, right? The fact that they're denying journalists access means that there's plenty to hide right now. I will say, though, that the rhetoric coming from Tel Aviv, Jamal, continues to be very aggressive. They continue to say that they will go in and, maybe continue the bombing if it turns out that the sites were not obliterated. There was also a leaked report. I don't know if it was leaked, but it was also said by Katz, the defense minister, that they wanted to take out Khamenei, the supreme leader in Iran, but the opportunity wasn't there. So they're openly, talking about assassinating, top political figures yet again. So, I mean, I do think that the bigger story here, despite what is being reported, is that the Israeli government and military is getting a free pass, committing these war crimes, going against international laws. They continue to do these acts of aggression, and no one is saying anything, Jamal. I mean, we should say something of the fact that nothing is being said from the Gulf or from other Arab countries right now. Have you heard anything?
Well, I heard actually, I was going to mention that Iran also recently said that they'll be filing, I don't know where, whether it's in the international courts or at the UN, a lawsuit asking for damages because they did not start that war.
Right.
They're asking for damages from Israel, and they're asking for damages from the United States. I don't know if that's going to advance anywhere. But that's where they're at, and it as was reported, Iran wasn't the aggressor; it was Israel or Netanyahu, and Netanyahu who started it first. I believe at the end of the day, and we know that at least from what we've been seeing, that he bit off more than he could chew. He wasn't expecting that response going to happen from Iran, and then started 2 days into the war screaming, asking the United States to join in. And we were saying, I hope this does not happen. Unfortunately, the United States joined, but at least this was minimized, that it hasn't blown into a full-fledged war that affected the Straits of Hormuz and the flow of oil and more retaliation and so forth.
Yeah, that's right, Jamal. I mean, the fact is, we don't know the reality on the ground right now in terms of the Iranian capability. Most people at this point continue to believe that there is some capability left, but we won't know for some time. But we need to transition. There was this big kind of political earthquake, in between the Iranians and the Israelis. But there's a local political earthquake that just happened last week, Jamal, with Zoran Mamdani, who beat Andrew Cuomo soundly in the primary for the mayor of New York City, your former hometown. I mean, it was unbelievable. Everybody, the New York Times, every person in the world said that Cuomo was going to win. And Mamdani shocked the political establishment, I would say especially Democrats, in soundly beating Cuomo. It was a major, major upheaval, Jamal.
Well, they made it more of an upheaval. To tell you the truth, I was in and out following this story as he was surging in the polls, because this is a primary after all. It's not it's a Democratic primary in New York City. We are in the midst of a war that the United States got dragged into it with Iran. We are going through 2 years now of slaughter in Palestine and other issues besides just like a mayoral race, and now they've made it into, in my opinion, an ugly issue. I'm looking at the different headlines, just so this is what we're going to talk about it. He's been called a Hamas terrorist sympathizer, a jihadist terrorist. There are calls for his deportations, predictions of another 9/11. These are just a few among the torrent of Islamophobic attacks that have erupted across social media and conservative political circle following his win, basically. I don't know what to tell you. It's a coordinated attacks spanning grassroots activists, senior political figures.
No, Jamal, let's really look at this. He was endorsed by Bloomberg, by Clinton, by Claiborne. I mean, the top elite of the Democratic Party. And, and tech billionaires were supporting him, not just Bloomberg, but Ackman. Um, people were coming out in the Democratic establishment, Jamal, and just saying Cuomo is our guy. Now, Cuomo got run, as we know, got run out of the governorship because of his sexual improprieties and misbehaviors in the governor's office, and Mamdani was out there kind of building this grassroots campaign across all the boroughs, across all sectors, including, and we should say this because, we know that AIPAC and pro-Israel forces have been completely vicious in attacking Mamdani, but at the same time, his ability to connect with the Jewish community in New York has been really amazing. He's going to run against Eric Adams, right, who has his own baggage. There's some speculation that Cuomo might run as an independent. I doubt that's going to happen. But everybody is freaking out that a 33-year-old Muslim man who has been steadfast in his support of Palestine and condemning the genocide in Palestine might be the next mayor of New York City, Jamal.
Well, we'll have to see, because to tell you the truth, the attacks have been horrendous. We don't know what's going to happen in the next few weeks. I mean, you have Republican Congressman Andy Ogles of Tennessee calling him Little Muhammad, and said he's an anti-Semitic, socialist, communist who will destroy the great city of New York. He needs to be deported. That's what he's saying, which is why, and I'm quoting his own words, I'm calling for him to be subject to denaturalization proceedings and so on. You have South Carolina Representative Nancy Mace posted a poll and asked if Mamdani should be denaturalized and deported. You have far-right activist and White House whisperer Laura Loomer posting on X that there will be, again, here's the fear-mongering, another 9/11 if he gets elected. And that, the funny thing about it, people who attack him, they just don't know where to attack him. They're like, to me, they're like so vile, but at the same time, they're so confused. At one point, they call him a terrorist, an Islamist, or whatever. On the other hand, they call him a communist. You cannot be a Muslim and a communist. That just doesn't work. If they can get it in their thick skull, they don't know that. So he's, I don't know what he is. He's a terrorist, socialist, communist, etc. They just throw anything at him and see if it is going to stick or not. And now you mentioned Adams, who basically, you mentioned the Cuomo, who left in disgrace. That's another person who is also in disgrace, which is Eric Adams, the current mayor of New York, who basically was under investigation for corruption until Trump stopped it for the time being, but he's under all kinds of investigations. And he knew he was polling so poorly, he did not even join in the race. And now all of a sudden, now he wants to run whatever, as a Republican or as an
independent, I think,
or as an independent, and he's making the circle, saying that he Mamdani is an anti-Semite, and he's also an Islamist, and he's a communist, and he'll ruin New York, as if New York wasn't ruined under him, because I don't think he has anything to brag about. I mean, we don't live in New York, but we know how to read. And that's why he didn't enter in the race to begin with. But because he beat Cuomo, there's a confusion badly. Now he thinks that he has a better shot.
He doesn't. I don't think he does, Jamal. I mean, Democrats, just to remind our listeners and viewers, outnumber Republicans 6-1 in New York City and all of the boroughs. So it's a Democratic stronghold. I really think the bigger story here, Jamal, is between the older Democratic elite who continue to kind of, they lost the presidential election because of what they did with Biden and Harris. and their inability to kind of speak to what Democrats are really concerned about, including Palestine and the war in Gaza, Mamdani did not shy away from that. He took it on despite the attacks. He basically condemned, he called it a genocide. And he did not shrink from that despite all the attacks on him. And guess what, Jamal? He won. Now that he won and he's appealing to a more centrist, kind of group, he needs to kind of collect himself and get reconnected to the African American community in New York. But he hasn't changed his message. This is a wake-up call, Jamal, as we've been saying for many months now to the Democratic elite. They're losing. Their message is not resonating. Their people are not going to vote for them. They're going to lose again. And I mean, the Mamdani is basically giving them an idea of what it's going to take to reconstitute the Democratic Party. And what it means is condemning Israel, supporting Palestine, calling it a genocide, ending the bloodshed.
Well, I thought won for him in the debate, and I think a lot of people think the same way, is when they asked what to all the candidates where you're going to be going, if you win the mayoral race, and
oh yeah,
they'll be saying, well, this is my first. I haven't been to Israel, but it's going to be my first trip to Israel. Somebody else would say, oh, I've been to Israel 4 or 5 times, and I'm going to go again to Israel. And another person said, this will be my second time to Israel. I have to go to Israel. And they went to Mamdani and said, I'm going nowhere. I'm going to be in New York City. And it should be, I'm going to be talking to my constituents. And this is how it should be. Why even that question is relevant to ask of a mayor of a city, or a future mayor of a city, where if they should be heading, into a foreign trip, and everybody runs and say Israel, or I don't care if they said Italy or France or whatever, it's the same thing. You should be paying attention to your own people here. It's not about other countries. It's not about foreign countries. And I think that's where he connected. And that's the biggest soundbite, actually. Maybe millions of people saw that soundbite.
No, I think it's a really perfect example, Jamal, of what we're speaking about. He sticks to his message. He speaks to what the needs are. People can no longer afford to live in New York. He wants to have rent control. He wants, child care for people who are working. He wants free bus rides for people who, going to work. I mean, he's really speaking to the economic anxiety that people in this country and New York City, obviously, really experience right now. And the Democratic elite are not speaking to that message. And that's why they're losing. And that's why Mamdani's won and beat Cuomo. And I have a prediction, I'm pretty good at this, predicting. He's going to beat Adams, they're going to pull out all the stops. They're going to have all this AIPAC money coming in. He's going to be called an anti-Semite, all this stuff. And guess what? He's going to win. So we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. And this should have been, the Democrats should have been happy to have new blood injected.
No, they're not.
To have an exciting person that some people have compared him to Obama and so forth. Instead, they turned it into an ugly race. And we failed to mention that he also received death threats.
Right.
Multiple death threats. But as you've said, we'll see what's going to happen. You've been listening to Arab Talk on KPO San Francisco 89.5 FM. Go to our website, arabtalkradio.com, to download the latest shows, and we'll talk to you next week.
See you next week.